Target's warning shot came in stark numbers: a 19% drop in operating profit, a 21% plunge in net income, and stock losses approaching 28% in 2025 alone. The retail giant, once insulated by scale, admitted that tariffs on Chinese imports, covering nearly a third of its merchandise, had become an unbearable burden. Shoppers launched a viral Skip Target campaign, frustrated by rising prices and eroding trust. If even America's second-largest retailer is cracking under tariff pressure, what chance do smaller businesses and their workers really have? For much of the past 2 decades, Target symbolized the stability and resilience of American retail. With more than 1,900 stores nationwide, its red bullseye logo was a familiar fixture in suburbs and cities alike. Target cultivated a reputation as the middle ground between Walmart's scale and department stores' polish: affordable, stylish, and reliable. Its supply chains were streamlined, its customer loyalty program celebrated, and investors viewed the company as a safe harbor in an often volatile retail landscape. Even during earlier downturns, Target maintained steady growth and consistently met or exceeded Wall Street expectations. But cracks began to emerge as global trade shifted. The 2018 tariff wars with China had already rattled import-heavy retailers, raising alarms about long-term exposure. Target, sourcing roughly 30% of its merchandise from China, was particularly vulnerable. Though leadership managed to cushion the immediate impact, the memory of those disruptions lingered. The pandemic years compounded the strain, disrupting logistics networks and forcing costly adjustments. By 2025, as Trump reintroduced aggressive tariffs and global markets reeled, the pressures mounted. Consumer confidence faltered, spending on discretionary goods slowed, and social media backlash fueled the Skip Target trend. What was once a fortress of U.S. retail now stood exposed, its vulnerabilities magnified by trade policy and shifting consumer sentiment. In early 2025, Washington doubled down on its protectionist experiment. Citing economic security, the White House imposed sweeping tariffs on Chinese imports, affecting everything from electronics and toys to household goods. For retailers like Target, this was devastating. Nearly 1/3 of its merchandise originated in China. Suddenly, products that had filled aisles for years, kitchen appliances, apparel, and seasonal goods, carried a hidden tax. The administration defended the move as a bold effort to restore U.S. manufacturing. Officials insisted that absorbing short-term pain was necessary to secure long-term sovereignty. They pointed to the South Korea precedent. When threatened with a 25% duty, Seoul struck a deal at 15%, promising $350 billion in investments and energy purchases. Tariffs work, Trump declared, because they bring our partners back to the table. But retail executives saw a different picture. Unlike auto or steel, where supply chains were concentrated, consumer retail relied on vast, diversified imports. A tariff shock on Chinese goods rippled across entire categories simultaneously. A mid-sized grill that once retailed for $550 now carried an additional $165 in costs due to metal tariffs. Video game consoles, already expensive, were pushed even higher, just as households faced inflation fatigue. The stock market mirrored the chaos. In April, when new tariffs were announced, global markets lost trillions in value within days, the steepest slide since 2020. Retail stocks led the plunge, with Target among the worst hit. By summer, its share price was down nearly 28%, eroding billions in market capitalization. For policymakers, tariffs were leverage. For consumers, they were higher bills. And for companies like Target, they were a ticking time bomb, raising costs without offering any clear path to replacement supply. Inside Target's Minneapolis headquarters, the mood turned grim. In Q1, executives warned of falling sales, trimming annual guidance for the first time in years. By the second quarter, the numbers confirmed the spiral. Revenues down 1.9%, operating profits down 19.4%, and net income plunging 21%. For a retailer, long prized for predictability, these figures were shocking. Outgoing CEO Brian Cornell was blunt. He admitted tariffs had created massive cost pressure, given Target's dependence on Chinese suppliers. Yet he resisted raising prices too aggressively, calling it a last resort to protect loyal shoppers. But restraint had a price. Margins collapsed, and investors fled. When Cornell announced his retirement in August, handing the reins to Michael Fidelka, markets panicked. Shares dropped another 6 to 10% in a single session. Analysts described the moment as a crisis of confidence, doubting whether new leadership could steer through such turbulence. Credit agencies downgraded Target's outlook, citing not only weakening consumer demand, but also systemic exposure to trade policy. Outside boardrooms, public sentiment was shifting too. Online, a viral campaign, #SkipTarget, captured anger at rising costs and shrinking choices. Some shoppers blamed tariffs for making essentials unaffordable. Others accused the company of failing to adapt. The backlash amplified Target's struggles, eroding brand loyalty at the worst possible moment. The pain was not confined to Target alone. Competitors like Walmart and Costco also reported cost pressures. But Target's mid-tier positioning, neither the cheapest nor the most exclusive, left it squeezed from both sides. Suppliers passed on higher input prices, while consumers traded down to discount outlets or delayed purchases altogether. What had begun as a policy tool to protect American industry was now shredding confidence in one of its biggest retailers. A company that once represented suburban security now looked fragile, caught between tariffs it could not control and consumers it could not afford to alienate. By late summer, the situation hardened into deadlock. Washington would not retreat. Retreat would mean conceding that tariffs had failed. Target could not fully pass costs onto shoppers without accelerating the boycott trend, and consumers, already squeezed by inflation, could not spend their way out of the spiral. The result was paralysis. Shelves remained stocked, but margins withered. Investors watched nervously as quarterly reports painted a consistent story of decline. Analysts warned that if tariffs persisted into 2026, the entire mid-tier retail sector could face consolidation, bankruptcies, or worse. Meanwhile, international comparisons only deepened frustration. South Korea, having bargained for a lighter tariff load, saw exports boom, chips up 30%, cars up 22%. Yet in the US, households faced higher grocery bills, pricier electronics, and shrinking choices. For Target and its workers, the question was existential. How long could a proud retailer survive in a policy battlefield where survival itself was collateral damage? For Canada, the tariffs were a double-edged sword. At first glance, they targeted Chinese imports, not Canadian goods. Yet ripple effects cascaded across the border. Target's contraction meant fewer purchase orders for Canadian suppliers of apparel, packaged foods, and home goods who had long depended on the retailer's vast distribution network. Small manufacturers in Ontario reported canceled contracts as Target slashed procurement. Logistics hubs in Toronto and Vancouver saw freight volumes dip, erasing jobs in warehousing and trucking. The damage was amplified by consumer psychology. Canadian shoppers, watching prices rise at US-linked chains, shifted their habits. Many migrated toward local discount retailers or online platforms, bypassing cross-border brands altogether. This hollowed out demand for Canadian firms integrated into US retail supply chains. By late 2025, trade associations warned of a stealth recession, as companies that once thrived on Target's consistency now faced cascading layoffs. The once stable retail bridge across the border had turned shaky, undercutting not only revenues, but also trust. In the United States, the shared cost was even more visible and visceral. Shoppers walking into Target found higher prices on everyday goods, grills, electronics, even Father's Day gifts. A mid-range barbecue set that once sold for $550 now cost over $700 as tariffs on steel and aluminum trickled down to the sales floor. Coffee prices spiked too, after Brazil retaliated with its own restrictions, leaving U.S. importers scrambling. Consumers, already stretched by inflation, vented their frustration online and in-store. Many joined the viral Skip Target movement, vowing to boycott a chain they felt no longer delivered value. For workers, the pain was personal. Rumors of reduced hours and job cuts spread across regional outlets. Investors saw billions in market capitalization erased, while communities dependent on Target's employment base braced for downturns. Meanwhile, policymakers touted tariffs as leverage, insisting that domestic manufacturing would eventually fill the gap. But the immediate reality told another story: disrupted supply chains, alienated consumers, and a weakened retail giant. Instead of shielding Americans from global shocks, tariffs had unleashed them at the checkout line. The cost was not abstract. It was sitting in every shopping cart. The tariff battles have left scars across both sides of the border. In Canada, suppliers and workers face layoffs and shrinking markets. In the United States, consumers pay more while Target, once a symbol of retail resilience, struggles to hold ground. Politicians insist that short-term pain will yield long-term gains, yet the immediate fractures run deep.